Certainly have been blessed and encouraged in the time that we've spent here today already. Healing is such a blessing, and it's exciting to see healing taking place. Whether it's physical or spiritual, either way. Open your Bibles to the book of Psalms, Psalm 34. I'd like to take us there. For our text this morning, we're going to be looking at two different Psalms. One is in Psalm 34, and then we're going to go to Psalm 125 and read the first 5 verses there. I invite you to stand as we read the scriptures, and it's not just a real long reading, so you won't be standing here for a long time. Psalm 34:1 says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. O fear the Lord, ye his saints, for there is no want to them that fear him. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. Now let's go to Psalm 125. I'd like to read the first 5 verses in Psalm 125. Psalm 125, verse 1. They that trust in the Lord shall be as Mount Zion, which cannot be removed, but abideth forever. As the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is round about his people from henceforth, even forever. For the rod of the wicked shall not rest upon the lot of the righteous, lest the righteous put forth their hands unto iniquity. Do good, O Lord, unto those that be good, and to them that are upright in their hearts. As for such as turn aside unto their crooked ways, the Lord shall lead them forth with the workers of iniquity, but peace shall be upon Israel. You may be seated. The inspiration for the message today comes from our recent trip to Kenya. Brother Mike was guessing correctly in part of that. And there are many things that I enjoyed about that trip. Joe, will this automatically switch over, or do I have to select something here? Okay, there we go. There we go. I was quite enamored on our trip by the animals that we saw in the wild that we don't have here in America. And I'm sure that the children especially would enjoy if my text this morning were Genesis 1, and I would read how God made the cattle and all the creeping things and the beasts, and on the 6th day, and then spend the rest of the morning showing you some of those beasts. Even though that was quite thrilling to actually have a leopard right outside our vehicle that was so close that if I would have reached down, I could have touched it. That was quite a thrilling thing. That was not what brought the inspiration for the message this morning. I'm going to show you a picture of where Charla lives. I'm not sure why this thing didn't Just a minute here. It isn't right now. It's extending it. You want to come up here and help me a little bit, please? Right now I have it on the slideshow on PowerPoint. So we need to. We'll have to go off by itself. This is the house where Charla lives, and this is part of a compound where there's numerous houses. But around each of those houses, and this doesn't really show it as much, except you see it to the left, you see the row of trees, and all along those houses are hedges. And even though they live really close together, you don't hardly realize that you're that close to someone else because of those hedges. But I was, really got things working here. There we go. That was the guest house where we stayed. That was just showed. I just put that one in, but you'll see that there's some hedges and that beautiful tree right beside the house. I don't know if my battery's getting weak or what, but well, it might work better if I'm down here a little closer. This was to the right of that building, and you'll notice that row of hedges along the side. There is actually the neighbor right next, across the wall is some Indians that live there. But you'll notice that these hedges, and those hedges are everywhere around those compounds. This was the driveway coming in off of the main road back to where they live. And along each side of the road, you have walls and hedges. And actually it was a very, very pretty place. It was very beautiful. This was actually this is where you go off the road into where Charla lives. The schoolhouse is there as well. But notice again the hedges and the walls that surround this. The gates are there, but the hedges are completely surround this building. This is on past it, going down to the kind of the end of this road. But there are paths. There are paths there around the compound. There are paths there, and along these paths are hedges, giving a very nice place to walk. These were just, I started noticing these hedges, and I was rather intrigued by them. So I started taking some of these pictures. And I found out there were different things about the hedges that I noticed. One is that it does provide some privacy. It does do that, but it also makes a distinctive barrier. Then there is a reason that they're there. But also that I started to notice that among these hedges are some very beautiful things. And they have various types of bushes and things there. But I noticed that the hedge was also, not only was it a barrier, it was also a thing of beauty. This was outside their playground at school. This is where they swing. And all around there are hedges. Hedges Make so other people from out on the street don't come in there. They make so that, and actually kind of handy because it keeps the children right there at the school as well. But there's the hedges. And it doesn't matter that the hedges are there. They have a lot of fun swinging on those hedges, swinging inside those hedges. And I tell you, they can get those swings going. I saw them almost straight out each way. But they had a lot of fun on those swings. This was something I noticed on the hedge. Beautiful flower. And I was rather intrigued by it. This is another flower that I saw in the hedge that I appreciated. But the main reason for those walls and hedges is for protection. That's what they're there for. At night, those gates are closed and locked. I had showed you that one picture where the gates were closed. They are closed and locked. And if you were outside the hedge and you wanted to come inside, at that point, it would take a lot of effort. And as I looked at these hedges and I observed them, it made me start thinking about spiritual hedges. And the title of the message this morning is The Provision of the Hedge. That's the title of the message, The Provision of the Hedge. Now, a term that we often use, or you are very familiar with, is that we'll use is a hedge of protection. We're all familiar with that. I've used that term various times. In fact, I can distinctly remember even praying that phrase. God, we're asking you to keep a hedge of protection either about me or maybe about my family or a loved one, someone that you know. And sometimes we are talking about in a physical sense. John's over Ukraine. God, keep a hedge of protection about them. And we're talking about from the bombs and missiles that are flying around. God, keep them at bay. But in that, we're saying, God, keep them from spiritual harm and danger as well. When we pray that, what are we really asking for? I will tell you why I use that phrase. We know the story of Job. And Job 1, verse 9 and 10 says, and this here comes after a discourse that Satan and God were having. They were having this discussion. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made a hedge about him and about his house and all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hand, and his substance is increased in the land. That was Satan's complaint to God. He said, God, you this hedge. He said, God, I can't attack this man. I can't afflict him because there is a barrier there. And he called it a hedge. Satan wanted to wage a full-blown attack on Job. But he found himself restricted. He could not pass God's hedge. He couldn't pass it. How'd the hedge get there? Satan knew. His complaint to God was, God, you made that hedge all around him. It's on every side. And he was indicating that he just couldn't get through that hedge. And as I was meditating on that, it made me think of verse 2 in our text today. And that's a verse that came to my mind as I first started thinking about the possibility of using this in a sermon. As the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is round about his people from henceforth, even forevermore. And I like that. a hedge that surrounds his people. It is all around us. This makes me think of the story of Elisha and his servant. King of Syria had sent his army down to Dothan to capture Elisha because somebody told the king of Syria that we know how your secrets are getting to the king of Israel. There's a man down there called Elisha, and he said the things you whisper in your bedchamber, that man is telling the king of Israel. So Elisha thought, okay, I'm getting that man. We're going to get rid of this problem. So he sends him down. 2 Kings 6:14. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host. And they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servants of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. The Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. That's a thrilling story, a thrilling thing he saw. And in a way, I kind of get that same sense about Job. Satan called it a hedge. But those horses and chariots of fire were a distinct barrier that the enemy could not cross. And I'm not going to say the rest of the story, but very interesting what happened there. And they had a tremendous deliverance from the Syrians. Now, in Bible times, the purpose of the hedge was not for decoration. I showed you some pretty things, the flowers, and did you notice that the hedges were trimmed pretty nicely? You know, they look nice. See how the hedge was taken in an arch over the gate that goes into the school? That was very pretty. But the purpose of the hedge in Bible times was not for beauty. They were for protection. Now, in Kenya, they use hedges a lot, like a wall or a hedge or a fence, especially in the Maasai village that we visited. We visited this village. And behind these ladies, you'll notice a hedge. That's the reason I have this picture up there. See those gnarly bushes in the back? See those kind of lower over the ladies' shoulders? That looks like there are some sticks and stuff. It looks like a thorny, brambly mess. That's what their hedges look like. And those hedges are completely around the village. They surround the village. This is a picture inside the village. Those are the houses they live in. The man took us into one of his houses, and let me tell you, that's drastically different than the houses we live in. And but do you see what's behind those houses? I realize this picture doesn't show it well, but you'll see those bushes and trees sticking up. And behind those houses is a thick mat of these brambles and briars. They don't trim them. They don't. It's not for beauty. That's not why they have the hedge. They have that for protection because the lions are out there. I took that picture of that lion only about 3 miles from that village. At night, the lions come prowling. And they know that if they're not inside, well, back up a little bit. Every night, they bring their sheep and their goats inside that village, in the center, kind of where I showed that picture a moment ago. Well, I don't want to back up. I think my battery's getting a little weak. But anyway, they bring them into there, and they put them in the center of that village, and then for a gate, they have like this gap, and there's a gap about, 4 or 5 feet wide, where you can walk through when you go into the village, and that's where they bring their animals. At 6 o'clock every evening, the animals are to be brought inside in the center of the village. And then they have this big pile of brush and sticks, and they pile those, they close up that gap. And the hedge looks like the rest of the hedge. And the reason they do that was, do you know what that lion will do to the sheep and the goats? It's going to kill them. It's going to eat them. That's what that lion will do. And the people and animals are kept safe as long as they're inside that hedge. They're kept safe. He said once in a while, an elephant comes over there, and they dread that because the elephant can do tremendous destruction. In fact, he said more people are usually killed by elephants than actually from lions. Because he said the elephant will have gone up past their village, up into the bush, and he stayed hidden up there. And they come up there driving their sheep and their goats and their cattle up through there, not knowing that behind the bush is an elephant. And the elephant will charge and kill. So these animals, that is a real thing. And those hedges that they have are for protection. Now, one of the ways that we know that that in Jesus' day that they used hedges was by one of the parables that he told us. In Matthew chapter 21, verse 33, Jesus said, "Here another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and led it out to husbandmen, and went to a far country." But he hedged it about. He planted these briary, brambly things in a hedge to create a distinct barrier, and it was for protection, so that the predators would stay out. They would not destroy the vines. They would not come eat the grapes. A few years ago, I had the privilege of visiting Ireland, and I noticed there they have a lot of hedges as well. They're used kind of like fences there. And those hedges come right out to the edge of the road. I mean, out to the edge of the road. In Ireland, they also drive on the left side of the road like they do in Kenya. But in Ireland, with the edges coming right out to the edge of the road, and with the roads being so narrow, there are times that you have to give all the room you can to squeeze by. And I noticed something interesting on those vehicles. Every vehicle I think I looked at, on the passenger side, those mirrors are all scraped and scratched up because of the hedges. That's why. That's why. Those hedges make a distinctive barrier you cannot ignore. They're there. And I was riding as a passenger when we were about getting into the hedge, and it was almost causing me to be nervous because I knew if we get into that hedge, it would make a mess. We've been talking about physical hedges, and the reason I showed you those pictures this morning of these different hedges and talked about these hedges is because physical things help us to understand spiritual things. And that's the reason of these pictures here this morning. The hedge that Satan was complaining to God about was a spiritual hedge. And we understand that it was more impenetrable than any physical hedge, because Satan could not get through it. With a lot of effort, you could actually work your way through some of these other hedges that I talked about. There'd be some long saws, maybe some equipment, something. You could get through those hedges. But the hedge that God has around his people cannot be broken through by any man. The only way anything can pass that hedge is if he allows it. And that realization is a great comfort. It is an inspiration to me. So think about that type of hedge. And God alone is the keeper of the hedge. The attack of Satan on God's people are completely metered by the hedge that he has about us. And we would read more of that and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But he is limited what he can do to the child of God. Only the things that God allows can come through that. And so the spiritual protection that God has for his people is completely unparalleled. It's a protection that anyone would want. It's a good protection. And this protection can be a benefit even to those who are around God's people. Job prayed and sacrificed for his family every day. And Satan couldn't even get to Job's family because of that. Satan couldn't get to them until God allowed it because of this spiritual battle that was taking place that Job could absolutely not see. He didn't know it was taking place. The prayers from God's children for spiritual protection, for loved ones, for people we know, we pray for that, make a difference. They really do. They make a difference. And we should do that and do it often. In 1 Thessalonians 5, we're exhorted to pray without ceasing. God hears our intercession. And that to me is so encouraging. How do you think this hedge of protection exists today? We're not just open and free pray. Why are we not just open and free pray for the enemy? You know, when Jesus gave himself to be a sacrifice for all mankind, the devil thought he had gotten him. He really did. The devil had no idea what victory would be won over him. The Bible tells us that if Satan and his cohorts had known how they would have been defeated, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory. We find that in Scripture. And it is because of what happened at the resurrection of Jesus Christ that we have this spiritual protection today. That's why we have it. Colossians 2 tells us that Christ spoiled principalities and powers and triumphed over them by the work on the cross. Very clear about that. And he did that because of the things that were against us. And we have the provision of this hedge today because of the work of Jesus Christ on the cross of Calvary. And we need that hedge of protection. We need it. Now, don't think at all that Satan is pleased about this protection. For one thing, he is the enemy of God. And simply because you are made in the image of God, he will want to get you to serve him and not God. And he's going to do his best to get you to do that. Satan wants to do everything he can to get anyone, to get at them, anyone who follows and serves Jesus Christ. And a person who does that, who follows Christ, is conformed into the image of Christ. And Christ is the one who has complete power over Satan, his complete victory over him. And you being conformed into the image of Christ is a terrible reminder of his defeat and the threat it is to him. But we must never forget that this protection is not our own. It is because of the power of Christ. It's not of ourselves. We are no match for the devil in our own strength. Now, when we were in Kenya, we had some invaders that crossed the hedge. If I can get this thing to cooperate with me. Maybe it sits there a while. That's a picture of some of the invaders that came. They crossed the barrier of the walls and the hedges, and they had come for one purpose: to steal and to destroy. That's why they came. They stole some papayas from the tree. Caught him in the act. Right there he is. See, he has a papaya in his front paws. He's eating them. They broke down some of the sugar cane. Now, I confess that us Americans that aren't used to baboons roaming around were pretty intrigued, because we never had baboons from the wild come pay us a visit. You know, they'd come as close to you as 15 or 20 feet. And they weren't worried at all, because they saw we didn't have any weapons in our hands. They weren't concerned. And so we took plenty of pictures before we kind of helped them get out of there, tried to chase them off. But you know what? The locals there have no appreciation for these things. None at all. They don't want them to come because of all the damage that they did. I was talking with one of the locals, telling how the baboons had come, and they said, no, you don't want them. No. They do so much damage. Jesus made a comparison of the devil to a thief. And he said that the thief comes to steal, kill, and to destroy. But Jesus came so that we can have life and have it more abundantly. And this is the life that we have in Christ. He gives us power to be victorious over sin and Satan. And this realization should cause us to be thankful. Without the power of Christ in us, we wouldn't have a chance. But it is something that we shouldn't take for granted. And it behooves us to continually ask God for his protection about us. I think I mentioned it, but every evening the Maasai tribes, those people, close up that gap that surrounds their village. And you know what? They don't need to tell their people to get inside. They want to come inside because of the lions out there, because of the elephant and the rhino and the hippo that come up through there at night. And they will attack and kill. See, to them, the hedge is a good and necessary protection. Now, for Job, God made a gap in that hedge in a designated way. You could call it a gap, you could call it lowering, whatever. But even though what transpired was tragic and more than I can imagine facing, The hedge was not removed. Was not removed. And this gap or break in that hedge was because of the accusation that Satan had made against God. He told God that Job only serves you. The only reason he does, because you have this hedge around him and you've blessed everything. He's wealthy. But he said, if you take that away, he's going to curse you. So God told him, he said, go ahead and touch his possessions and all that he has and what he has. But he said, you don't touch him himself. Satan left God with a mission in mind. That's what happened. He had a mission in mind. He was going to get Job to curse God. That's what Satan's mission was. And that's all the bad things that Satan did to Job, was to get Job to curse God. Job lost everything he had. He was a man that had many possessions. He lost every last one of them. Lost them all. He lost the blessing even of his children. They all died in one day. I can hardly fathom that. All his children dying in one day. But you know what? In all of that, Job did not curse God. He did just the opposite. He blessed the name of the Lord. He said, the Lord gave, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Satan lost that round, but he wanted another shot at him. He told God, he said, you've touched his stuff, but not his own physical being. He said, let me touch his skin, and then he will curse you. God opened the hedge a little farther, or he let Satan bring that affliction to Job physically. Job was in great pain, terrible pain. We get that by reading through Job. He had terrible sores, and the pus oozed out of them. And it tells us that it stank. He was in a deplorable physical condition. And I'm not sure if it's chapter 3, it appears through the book of Job, we get the idea that this physical condition actually lasted for a while. I didn't read about how long they think it lasted, but it did actually last for a while. But Job did not curse God. Satan lost again, and the thing we see in this story is that Satan could not do all he wanted to do. He still couldn't do all he wanted to do. God allowed a certain amount and no more. And we understand that God, even in that terrible time, that God was sustaining him. God was sustaining Job during this great affliction that he faced. The spiritual hedge that we've been talking about is a wonderful protection. But another aspect to the hedge is that those within that protection find themselves hedged in. The protection that is there is also a constraint. And it's good for us to think about that and to analyze that. And as we think about that aspect of the hedge, we should not resent the constraint of the hedge. Sometimes we look at the inside of the hedge, we see constraints and don't really understand the protection it is giving to us. Job could not see the spiritual battle that was taking place. In his grief and pain and everything that he faced, in chapter 3 he said, "Why is light given to a man whose way is hid, and whom God hath hedged in?" He was in this terrible situation, and he felt like he was trapped in. I think he did. You can read more of what he said in the book of Job. He talked about it having been better to not have been born. And it was, and he just couldn't understand why. You know, facing difficult times are easier to bear when we understand why something is happening. But Job didn't know. When we face hard times, we want a way out, and Job was not any different. He talked of longing for death as a release to what he was experiencing, and death did not come. Didn't come. And his commitment to God, to waiting on God, even though he felt trapped in this terrible experience, is so encouraging. In chapter 14, Job said that he will wait for the appointed time when his change will come. Even in this terrible state, he says, God, I'm going to wait on you. He had no way of knowing that the change that we would be like what we read about at the end of the book of Job. He had no idea. He was thinking, my time on earth is about over. And the change he was thinking about was when he'd be released from this body of pain and sickness and the terrible things. That's what he thought. But the change that God had for him was much different. His faith in God was so deep that in this dark valley, he said some words that continue to inspire us to this very day. He said, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. The story of this great test and his deep faith continue to this very day. This story has been talked about down through the ages and will continue for as long as the world stands. When you feel hedged in, be patient, because your Redeemer liveth. Because your Redeemer liveth. So I was thinking about the hedge. And there where Charlotte lives, I thought about an individual who takes care of the hedge. I wished I could have taken a picture of him as he was out there working on the hedges with his machete that he trims the hedges with. Sammy sings as he works. You can hear him around the compound. He's whack, whack, whack with that machete, and he is singing. Charlotte said this was a picture Charlotte just sent it to me. I asked him if she had a picture of him trimming the hedges, because that's kind of what I wanted. This picture was taken very recently, and it had been very dusty outside, so he'd put on a mask. But Sammy is the keeper of the hedge on the compound, and he does excellent at being a keeper of the hedge. Him and his machete, he will work tirelessly for hours out there, keeping the hedge. We also have a keeper of our spiritual hedge that we have about us. God is the keeper of the hedge. And we have the promise that he will not let anything pass that hedge that we can't bear. When you feel all hedged in and you look around and you cannot see out, there is hedge surrounding you. There's one place to look, and that is up to the keeper of the hedge. When we feel trapped in, look up to the keeper of the hedge. That's where our hope is. That is where our protection is. This morning, I am so thankful for the provision of the hedge. And I hope this message has been an encouragement to you as well in whatever you face in life. Be thankful for the provision of the hedge and look to the keeper of the hedge. Lord bless you. Turn the time over to Brother Mike.